I think, the other part of this, and Mark, I kind of want to ask you a question, because I said this kind of leading up to, Nebraska and Casey Thompson and whatnot. And you said it exactly right. He was in the first half. I mean, he was an elite quarterback. I mean, he was accurate. He was making the plays. I think there was one play where I saw he literally put it on somebody. They dropped the ball. And I was like, well, that's just them, I mean, but he was making every play you want to make. In the second half, he looked like a completely different quarterback. I mean, he turned the ball over twice. He looked like Adrian Martinez, to be honest with you. And Nebraska fans will know what I mean when I say that. My thing is to this, could you have seen this coming? You know what I mean? And the reason why I say that is if you had to rank college football in the Power Five as far as defensive conferences are concerned, would you have, because he came out of the Big 12, which is not typically known for defense. You know what I mean? And I've seen this in a lot of my comment sections. He lit the Big 12 up last year as far as touchdowns and yards and whatnot are concerned. Could you have seen that from your standpoint, jumping up to the Big 10? Let me ask you this. Sorry. How would you rank the Power Five as far as, conferences and defensive rankings are concerned?
Well, for me, overall, there's no question that the SEC is the best conference. And there's also no question in my book that the Big Ten is the second best conference.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to challenge the SEC with the Big Ten. I think there's a clear distinction, but I also think that there's a clear distinction between the Big Ten and whomever else you think is third best. I tend to believe it's been the Big 12 at least the last year to 2 years. I think it's too close to call right now. We got to see the Pac-12, the Big 12, and the ACC play it out, and we'll see. And I'd be shocked if one of them jumped up to supplant the Big 10. But specifically on the defensive side, I think that's where the gap is even greater. If you look at Big 12 offenses, they can play generally with Big 10 offenses. Ohio State's kind of a different deal. The difference between the two conferences, defense. And this is and it shouldn't surprise anyone that Northwestern fixed its defense. At least, I don't expect them to have a great defense. They're not loaded with great talent, but they had a deplorable defense last year. Nebraska rushed for almost 450 yards against them last year, and Northwestern was bottom 3 in the country in rush defense, and that's not like them. They had lost their long time defensive coordinator, Mike Hankwitz, after the 2020 season, in which they went to the Big Ten championship game, and they clearly missed him. And I heard Pat Fitzgerald over the last couple of weeks make a couple of comments that seemed, if I didn't respect him so much, seemed to be coach speak and trying to puff up his team and getting sick of hearing how bad they were, kind of rhetoric, like we're not as bad as everyone thinks. But I heard two things out of his mouth. Number one, we're going to surprise people defensively on how good we are. Number two, he said, and this offensive line was bad last year. They were bad everywhere. They didn't do anything well, pretty much. They had a couple of decent players like an Evan Hull at running back last year with 1,000 yards, but they were pretty much bad doing anything last year. And I heard Pat Fitzgerald make the comment the other day that they will have their best offensive line in 17 years since he's been there. Well, maybe they do.
Right. Man, did they? Here was my, again, like we talked about, like the keys to the game, starting the game off. I think I said Nebraska, again, like I said, it was a completely different than what I expected. I thought Nebraska was going to get after the quarterback and their run defense was going to be suspect, right? I thought that's what was going to happen. They didn't really get after the quarterback. When Northwestern wanted to throw the ball, even if it was like down the field, I remember it was right before halftime where they went to, Helinski threw that ball wide open. That was Nebraska's strength, right? The pass coverage. They didn't defend it. They didn't get after the quarterback. They didn't defend it. And ironically, I thought in the first half, when I said it, I got my page and a half worth of notes here. Their run defense was actually surprisingly really good in the first half. They were stepping up. The walk-on Feist did a pretty good job, I felt like, at certain points. They got Devin Drew in there. They got I'm trying to think of the other kid. Stephon Wynn. they got some of these guys in, and they did a good job at plugging up the middle and sort of stopping Northwestern and forcing them to throw the ball. But as the game wore on, you started seeing more, and this goes back to what I said early on, right? This is what I said on my own podcast. I said they didn't tackle in the spring game, and there's a difference with it, right? There's a difference when you look at Alabama, Georgia, some of the top programs in the country where they're physical and they demand that physicalness. You have to be physical, you have to wrap up, and you have to tackle. And this is exactly what I was trying to say. And people said, well, you can't really gauge anything out of a spring game. You absolutely can. And this is exactly what you gauge. You gauge whether or not a team is going to have these sort of principles that we talk about. They missed several tackles, Nebraska did, throughout this game, where guys are going to the outside, the perimeter, and they just make a guy miss, and they sort of run through a tackle, and they keep going. And that is such the important part of it.